All right, folks, here we go. As I say, you've just had a quick peek through the 42 images there, and there are some absolute crackers in it. This is Central Blackpool. I really like this, and it's on my doorstep. You know, and it's one of them places where, because it's on your doorstep, you don't go down as often as perhaps you should, because you can get some fascinating shots. And this looks like a drone shot of looking up from almost the South Pier all the way up. So you've got Central Pier, North Pier, and then the tower on the right there, which is nicely on the third. What I really like about this is the colour saturations and the differences of the colour of the sand. I think that's a really fascinating shot. There's real patterns and shapes and forms and texture, and that gives you a real sense of depth that leads you from the foreground all the way up through. So I think that's a real cracking shot. That also thought about it, put the horizon nicely on the third there as well. So all in all, I think that's a pretty nice shot. I gave that a score of 17.
Brad Cheek.
This is Standing in the Light, and I thought this was quite a nice relaxing image to look at. Quite serene, very peaceful, like the way that the authors handled the composition with the leafage in the bottom and the leafage across the top to fill a blank sky, and then just got that sunrise coming over the, or dropping down behind the hills with just that little bit of flare. And the paddleboard, the just right in the reflection, just suits the image perfectly. So all in all, it was quite a nice relaxing picture to look at, and I've looked at them a few times, and I always just like the serenity of this one. I gave that a score of 15.
Anissa Sadat.
The Red Squirrel. I like the composition. I like the way that the author's got very low on this, and it got, you know, sort of eye level contact with the squirrel. It's eaten a peanut, so I think it's been enticed to come as close as you can get it to the author of the image. I'm not sure it's sharp, but I'm not sure it's pin sharp on my monitor here. The outer focus leafage in the foreground, the purple is a little bit distracting, but you know, your bluebells and you're on a level with the animal, you're going to get that. The thing I found really distracting is the grass running across the squirrel there, just irritates a little bit. The background's beautifully blurred. There's nothing, you know, sort of interfering with it. It's a little bit high in the highlights on it, which you could have taken down a little bit, but it's not too distracting. So I gave the Red Squirrel a score of 14. Squeezing Out a Living, and I think the author's taken a picture and then really added the title just to suit the image perfectly. You've got the guy with the squeeze box there, and the lady's just making a little donation. Shows it in a city centre environment, which works really nicely. Either she's making a donation or she's taking something from the box. I'm not sure which one, but either way, I think the image works nicely for the title. I gave Squeezing Out a Living a score of 15.
Peter Kay.
The Crow, I think this is a cracking image, this. I really do enjoy the colours in this. The contrast between the baseline of the ground where the bird stood on, the colour of the crow itself, and then the red leafage really suits the image very well. The crow is pin sharp front to back. You know, it's really caught nicely on that focal plane. Depth of field is just about perfect for it, and a catch light in the eye as well. I gave this a score of 19.
Kirsty Railton.
Bear with me one sec. This is Melissa Beach. Nice image of the beach there. I like the way you got a nice base here for the stones in the bottom. The lead through with the wet sand taking you through into the outcrops of rock. A little bit of green in the background, and then a fairly thunderous sky in the foreground. So it works quite nicely as that. However, once I looked through the image, I wasn't latching on to anything. I was just wandering around it. And I think it really needed a focal point just to hold your eye in the image, so you wasn't just wandering around a bit and then looking out of it. So it just needed a figure or a boat or something on, even if it was a dog on the beach or anything, just to hold your eye and give you something just to latch onto. I gave the beach shot a score of 14. Derelict Croft. And again, this is one of them that I came back to, and I can see the remnants of the Derelict Croft set amongst the foliage, the bushes and the trees there. And then it looks like there's a croft behind it as well, which is an entire perfectly good roof, again set within more foliage. So the derelict croft is lost because you've got this perfectly good roof filling the background. So it was a bit puzzling, because I'm sure that there might have been other sort of angles that you could have to emphasize this derelict croft, because it looks quite a fascinating place, but it's just lost within the the perfect roof behind it. So I think it's one of them images that you could look at and say, well, actually there are images here, but I just need to get the right image. I just think it's lost with the building in the background, the derelict cottage, and I gave that a score of 14. Crest of a Wave. I think compositionally you're just about perfect with this. You've got the rider there nicely on that third. He's got lots of space to move in. He's got a nice wash of white water behind him as the waves starting to break. There's a nice little base of white surf water coming in. So I think that works nicely. I think also that there's a little bit too much foreground. You've got, in effect, you've got like 5 layers there. You've got the bottom layer, which is where there's no surf at all. It's just the wash water on the beach. You can lose that because it's not adding to the image. The surf water coming up the beach, you could lose quite a bit of that as well, because that again isn't adding to the image. You could keep sort of a quarter of that, which would give you a nice surf base to work on, just breaking over the beach there, and that would just give you the 2 layers. I like the top side of it, where you've got the wave crashing all the way across. I think you also need to look at tone curves on this image. You just need a little tweak on it, because if you give it the tone curves a slight tweak, it really brings out the emerald green in that water, and really highlights the wetsuit as well, just by a slight S curve on the tone curve. Just put a little S on it, and it really emphasizes them colours. But I did quite like it, and I gave it a score of 15.
Carol Weatherly.
Sweet Nectar, again, an almost Roy Rimmer type shot. This beautifully done. Like the composition, love the colorization on it. The 3 wasps there drinking the water works very nicely. The reflections sort of work nice. When I looked at it quite close, there's the noses of and the yellow of the faces look a little odd. And I don't know whether it was just me, look the way I was looking at it, or whether or not it's part of the post-processing. But either way, really good quality image, nicely done. I gave that score of 17.
Andy Foreman.
Still standing down at Lytham Pier. Nice quality record shot. Good colour, sharp throughout from front to back. Nothing interfering with it. As a record shot, you know, the idea is that you can reproduce the item or the subject matter in the image from that image. And I think with this, you could mostly do it because you've got everything that you need to do it on this shot. So those aspects of it work very, very well. Good colour, saturation throughout as well. So all in all, as a record shot, it works well. I gave that a score of 15.
Mike Atkinson.
Barley Starling. And I thought this was a really nice capture of the bird. A lot of nature comments these days and judgings go on to say that the animal has to be doing something. You know, birds on a stick aren't good enough. I don't particularly agree with it. I don't disagree with the fact that if the bird's doing something, it doesn't enhance the image. But there again, just because it's not doing something shouldn't distract from the image either. It's a good quality shot. Overall, it's captured the bird well. You've got eye contact with him. You know, he's sat there proud looking at you. You've lost a little bit of detail across his breast there, you know, in the whites. But all in all, you've got some feather detail there. There's nothing distracting in the background. That's nicely out of focus. The bird stands out really well against that. So I thought, all in all, it was a nice picture of the Barley Starling. I gave that a score of 16.
Lucy Wilson.
Late evening field scene. I think the light in the image says it all. It's a beautiful sky. Really stands out nicely. The goals, little rays of sun coming through on the left there. The tree line stands out nice against that horizon. And then you've got the grass foliage in the foreground. I know the title says a late evening scene for field scene. However, I feel that there's a little bit too much field in the bottom. The interest lies in the top, really half to 2/3 of the image. I don't think the bottom third is adding anything to it. It's just grass that you can see, because it's the horizon, the sky, and that top third of the fields there that hold the interest, because that's where the colour is. That's where, you know, the feeling of the image comes through. I think the bottom third especially is just, as it says, a field of grass, and I don't really think it's adding to it. So I gave the late evening field scene a score of 15.
Ken McGrath.
A roebuck in a Lancashire meadow. I think this is a lovely shot. He caught the animal, just startled it. He's noticed you, he's looking at you, he's listening to see what's going on. You've got great contact with him. You've obviously caught him while he's been feeding, because he's just propped his head up there and just watching you, and even stopped chewing. So you have caught his attention very, very nicely there. Composition works really well because his head's nicely on that third. His body tucks away behind him. The outer focus foreground, you could lose a little bit of that, perhaps half of that, still keep it, because, you know, it acts as a base, so you don't want to lose it all. But do you need it all? No, you don't. You could lose half of the outer focus foreground. It's not quite as so distracting then. and you're not losing anything from the image, because it's the animal that captures you. You know, the eye contact that you have with it immediately drags you in. I gave the roebuck in a Lancashire meadow a score of 17.
Gary Barton.
A male stone chat, again, I'll refer back to what I said. The bird doesn't have to be doing anything for it to be a nice quality image. And this is a beautiful image of the stone chat in its natural environment. It's caught really nicely. You've got the good colours on it. You've got little catchlight in the eye. The bird's standing proud out on the branch there. You know, the background's beautifully out of focus on it as well. So, you know, there's good feather detail in it. So all in all, you know, if you want a photograph of a stone chat, you know, for part of your bird photography collection, that's as good as most you'll get. I gave that a score of 18.
Christine Armstrong.
Overwhelmed. And I like the idea and thought processes behind the image, what the authors looked at, because they've looked at this and just looked at the blaze of colour. And that works very nicely. You've got the bluebells in the foreground, and you've got the massive orange and yellow flowers, and then you've got that offsetting with the green foliage of the trees in the background. So the three layers all complement each other. The thing that, you know, sort of lets it down slightly is you've got a little bit of a burnout just centre right there on the leaves, petals. And again, it's one of them images where there's no real focal point. Once you look at that, you're left then wandering across the image, looking for something to latch onto. And because it's virtually all identical, every section of the image that you look at with the bluebells, the orange, red flowers in the background and the green, there's nothing that just drags your eye and holds it. So it's just lacking a little bit of a focal point to latch onto. I gave that a score of 15.
Carolyn Phillips.
What Dead Dolly? And I did chuckle at this. And you come back to it time and time again. And you got a lovely picture of that little girl there. And then you've got the dolly there. And then there's two lines running across, wet lines running across. It looks like the dolly's been run over, you know, by a car or something. So it was quite entertaining just looking at this little girl looking at a dolly. However, the interest is in the girl and the dolly and the bench and the cavernous room that she's sat in is a little bit too much. I think all the interest is in the right-hand side of the picture. I don't think the left's really adding to it, apart from showing her being in this cavernous, you know, seating area. I think the interest is the girl and the dolly, which, you know, is a nice record shot, one for the family album. So I gave that a score of 15.
Colin Rogers.
Doorway to Another World. Now, I did like this one. I really enjoyed the colours on this. I don't know whether the authors manipulated it and how they've done it, but I like the way that you've got the open doorway. You led through it. I like the doorway as well because I like the wood texture of the doorway and the way the door was made up. And then you led through into the grounds, and then you've got that foliage, which is sort of a cream foliage throughout from foreground to the distance. And then you led, if you look at the foliage when you walk through the grass there, and you know that there's almost a pathway leading you through. Could it have done with the focal point just in the middle of the field? Ideally, yes, you know, but you know, I think the the unusualness of this image just gives it that little edge with the colours that have been used on it. I gave that a score of 18.
Dan Stott.
Sunrise at Bromsash. And again, a lovely image, this. Very nice muted colours on it. I really like the recession you get from the foreground to the background. So you've got a nice base here. Again, you could lose a little bit of the base. You don't perhaps need all of that to act as a base, because that's in essence what it is. You're using that for the rest of the image to stand on. So you want a base for it to work from, but it doesn't have to be a big base. You know, you can lose half of that, keep all the interest in the base, and still give you something for your image to sit on. You've got that beautiful recession work through the mist there with the trees and the little woods in the background there, the bushes, the little hedgerows. Again, takes you into an almost white mist in the background, but you still kept the detail in it. You've got a beautiful horizon there, just with a little bit of colour in it as well. And again, I'm going to say the same again. You don't need all of that sky. You know, you could lose half of the sky that you have there, still keep a good sky in it, because it is a little bit moody, the sky. And because the interest lies in the, you know, the base, the recession work through that mist, and then the horizon with that little bit of colour that you get into it. All of the base and all of the sky are adding to it. You can still keep the impact of the image without having to have the top third of the sky and half the base. That's where the impact and the interest lie within the image. You have got focal points because you've got that tree in the foreground which takes you in. You're led through the through the mist, and then into the light, into the horizon as well. But then you're left to wander through a long, almost, you know, mundane sky. You don't need all the sky. I gave that a score of 17.
Brad Cheek.
St Mary's Church, Ray. This is beautifully lit. The quality of the images in this section is really very high. And this just again typifies the standard of the images. Well seen, good composition, beautifully lit, lighting's nice throughout, even into the where you've got the light coming in from the windows on the top right there. You've still kept detail in the window ledges there. I've got to be pernickety because you know you have to make differences between images. You've lost some of the flowers on the left-hand side, you know, so you've just lost that a little bit. But the sharpness is top quality from front to back. It's pin sharp. Really nice image. I gave that a score of 17.
Mike Atkinson.
Last leaf before winter. Very, very simple shot, but very well executed. I like the contrast between the gold browns of the leaf, the texture of the leaf against the stones that the leaf is lying on. So, you know, and the quality of light on that leaf just lifts it and really allows it to stand out nicely. It's nice and sharp throughout, all where you need it to be, which is the leaf and the base where it's sat on. A little bit out of focus at the top. You could perhaps lose that a little bit at the top where it's starting to go out of focus a little bit, and just, you know, but the leaf catches your eye and just holds you there. So it works very nice, that. And I gave that score of 16.
Lucy Wilson.
place to reflect. And again, this is quite a serene image. And one of these images that, like the one with the paddle border on, I came back to it and looked at it, and it was quite nice. You've got a nice base of the reeds in the foreground. You've got that lovely reflection with the far bank and very central in the image, and then you've got the hills in the background, which act very nicely, and a little bit of a moody sky. I'm sure there's one or two of you are going to guess my next comment is going to be, do you need all of the sky? Because you know that the horizon is where the reflection joins the land, and that's very, very central. Is all the sky adding to the image? Not particularly, because all the interest lies in that central part where the land joins the water, and where you've got that beautiful lit golds and greens being reflected in the water. So you could still lose part of the image. It's not adding to it, but still keep the interest and the impact there. I gave the place to reflect a score of 15.
Anissa Sadat.
Sunset Stork silhouette. A lovely image this. I think the lighting on this is beautiful. You've held the sun really well, so you've just got the circle of sun. It is burnt out, but it's still the perfect little circle there. Just a little bit of flare around the edges as well, add to it. You've got that beautiful gold orange rippling across either way. You've got the stalks of the grass in the foreground, work really nicely, all silhouetted nice. You've got a nice base for it to work on. You've got a tree on the right-hand side, and you know, just or is that the edge of the picture on my monitor? Sorry, you've just got that the bushes there on the right and on the left that just hold you in. You can still see the top of the stems of the grass as well, which aren't distracting. So you've not got too much at the top. So you're not losing the top of the image just going into blackness. I think that's a really, really good quality image. And it's one I'd have on my wall. And I gave that score of 20.
Jayaprakash Patel.
Somewhere to sit. You've got a nice lead in. Excuse me while I just have a brew. Thank you. You've got a nice lead in here with the pathway leading you up past the arches. You've got 3 seats on your left-hand side, and then you've got the roofage across all the top. So you're led through the image. No matter where you look, you are just led down to the archway at the bottom, where you've got that shrubbery, and because it's the brick is red, and you've got the green at the bottom. The green holds your eye because the complementary colours. So the green latches you on. So that works very nicely. My only thing is a place to sit. It would have been ideal is if there's 2 of you there, get somebody to go and sit on that centre bench and look as if they're contemplating something, and then call it somewhere to sit, because then you've got a real focal point that grabs you, because then you're wondering what is the person sat there thinking about, which really adds something to the image. I gave that a score of 15.
Colin Rogers.
Et in Artica Ego. This is an absolute lesson in tabletop photography. Great setup, really good quality lighting on it, beautifully taken. The authors thought about the composition, what they're setting out, how they set it out about it. So works really well. The only thing that I found a little bit distracting when I kept on looking at it was the strawberry on the right-hand side just looks like it's starting to, the whiteness on it just looks like it's starting to get a bit of mould on it. I found that quite distracted. Now, I might be absolutely totally out of order there and totally, you know, sort of way off the mark, but it just gives me that impression that it's just starting to go off a bit, that top strawberry. And I found that a little bit distracting. But I think it's a really well executed bit of tabletop photography. I gave that a score of 18.
Alan Phillips.
The body beautiful. If you want a lesson in how to do, you know, low key studio photography, this is it. Beautifully lit, beautifully set up. You've got really good lighting on the floor, which just throws a little bit of lighting on the girl's body. The background is nicely lit, so you're not losing her in the background. Like the contrast of the red hair that just holds you as well. The contours and the shape and the lighting on her body really emphasise that the authors understood his lighting in a studio setting. I thought that was a cracking shot, that, and I gave that score a 19.
Mandy Foreman.
Emerald Damsels. Again, studying wildlife. The authors caught this one really well. These animals are going to be almost stationary while they're latched onto each other and holding onto the stalk of the reed bed there. Beautifully sharp throughout, you know, on the wings as well, you've got them beautifully sharp. Nothing distracting in the background at all. So I think you've handled that really, really nicely. And I gave that a score of 18.
Gary Barton.
This is Purple Planets. And there are aspects of it that I like. I really enjoyed the colours on it, the different shades of purple that you get against that black in the almost stripe going across the centre of the image diagonally, which is the background. And then from the light purple in the top left-hand corner, you led through down to the bottom right-hand corner. So I thought aspects of it worked really well. My problem with it is there is a very, very fine focal plane, i.e. what's actually sharp. And if you look at it, it's in almost the centre of the bottom right-hand flower head there, and then just before the forefront of the one on the left, and everything else is out of focus. I think you needed a little bit more depth of field to ensure that everything in the foreground was in focus, and that plant on the left-hand side was in focus as well. The background, I don't mind that being out of focus, the foliage across the top of the image, but I think that the two seed heads in front of you, the bottom right and the one on the left there, absolutely had to all be nice and sharp. I gave that a score of 14. This is Rounding Up. I'm presuming this is in Spain. It might be wrong, but that's a presumption on my part. But I like the idea behind the image. The author's got the girl who's rounding them up, bringing the horses forward down towards them. So you've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 horses there all trotting towards you, with the girl in the background nicely. Nothing distracting in the background as behind her as well to take your eye away. So all your focus is on the horses and the girl, which works really, really nicely. I gave that a score of 15.
Ruth Lockery.
Path Through the Wild Garlic. And I think the image suits the title, because you've just got that path leading through the garlic, and then you've got the mass of garlic there, and then the wood in the background. If I was being a bit pernickety with it, the tree on the left-hand side, the largest of the trees there, I would have used that as a stop and sort of composed it, so then I was only using half of that tree as a stop, because you fall off the edge of that tree to the left of it and then fall out of the picture. I don't mind the path going through, but then there was nothing really, again, holding my eye into the image. It was a field of wild garlic, but no focal point to it. So again, I was left, just going into the path and then looking at the woods, because there's nothing to hold me eye there. And I think it's one of these things where there's, could I have looked at the composition and got something more from it? If you was looking at this image, because I'm sure that there's probably a dozen images within an area like this that you can get that really sort of bring out wild garlic. But as a record shot of walking through a field of wild garlic, I think it's really nice. And to be honest, it's one that I would have taken just as my record shot of walking through the field of garlic as well. I gave that a score of 14. Archie, great picture, one for the family album all day long. You've got this lovely little lad there. He's sat just nicely for you. And he's got his hands up there, you've got really good contact with him. It's a studio shot. It's well lit. You've got him. You've got real nice sort of little pose for him. I think it works really well. One for the family album every day of the week. I gave that a score of 15.
Colin Yates.
Wallflowers. I really like this. Very simple image, but the author's seen it very, very well. Love the contrast between the orange wall, the silver buckets, and the green foliage. I think that works superbly. The patination that you get with the wall that the flower are held on works really nice as well. It's just a very simple but well thought out and well taken and well seen image. It just holds together really well. I think the author's thought about his composition, because he's used a nice little base there and then just held the three in the top half of the image. Very simple, very well seen, very well put together. I gave the Wallflowers a score of 17.
Alan Phillips.
Elementary, Dear Watson. Nice studio shot. Again, works very well. Good lighting, good composition. You've got a nice character feature here, working well. And one of the nice things I like about this is somebody hasn't added smoke coming from the pipe, which I think just works for me. That so all in all, I thought that was a really good quality studio shot. Good detail on his face, nice highlights, nothing burnt out. You've got detail underneath the hat of his deer stalker there as well, which works well. You've thrown light up into his face. I gave Elementary a score of 17.
Peter Kay.
Flora. And again, quite a nice image. Love the spray of the flower there. Like the background, the white stands out against the background there nicely. The detail in the flower heads is quite good. It's nice and sharp. So there's nothing that I can really fault there. There's nothing on the edges of the image. The white flower heads hold your attention. you're going to think me terrible here, but there's a hoverfly on that right flower head, which once I'd noticed it on the top right one there, I could never take my eye away from it, which in some ways acted as a bit of a focal point, but dragged my eye away from the rest of the flower. So I found it rather annoying. So it made me chuckle that, you got this. I just wondered whether or not the author had actually noticed it, the hoverfly on the flower head when they were doing it. Probably just as he pressed print and it prints off, and then you think, damn, I've got a fly there that I never noticed. But it did make me chuckle. I thought it was a very simple but very well seen and well taken image, and I gave that a score of 15.
Keith Taylor.
The Lord of the Fell, again, a really good quality, well seen image. Again, if you just tweak the tone curves on this, it really does allow the sheep to really stand out well against the background. You just need put a little less on your tone curves, and he just really brings out the detail in his coat. It's a real nice image. I like the stance that the ram's got there. I love the agricultural machinery dilapidated in the background there. Nice grey thundery sky in the background, a bit forbidding, but I think it's just a good quality image all around. That I gave that a score of 17.
Kirsty Railton.
Do you want to build a snowman? Now, this is just such an awe shot. It really is. It's beautifully done. I love the little jersey that dog's wearing. He looks really happy to be wearing it, though, doesn't he? The look on his face is just to die for. Again, he's in. It's snow on the ground. But that works very well. Goes out of focus immediately behind it, just before you get to the end of the dog, because his hind legs are out of focus as well. But what I do like about it is you've got looks like bike tracks that just sort of give a nice little V for him to sit in. So everything just holds your eye onto that dog's face. Works really nicely, that. And I gave Do You Want to Build a Snowman a score of 17.
Colin Yates.
Only on the grounds that I really like the shot. Contemplating His Fate. Again, a good quality image. Taking a reenactment day. So you've got this guy stood there. The author's, thought about his title for this image, Contemplating His Fate. His fate. It's nice and sharp. The author's treated the background so there's nothing distracting. They've almost done away with it, so then there's just him. They've monochromed the background so it's not there's no colours to take your eye away from him. The red sash and that he's wearing is really eye-catching. His face stands out very nicely. The only thing I find rather distracting is the face protectant that's dropping down above his nose. It is a little bit distracting because it stops you looking at all his face, but that's part and parcel of his uniform. But otherwise, I think the authors handled that image really nicely. I gave that a score of 16.
Ruth Lockery.
The blue tit. The blue tit itself is beautiful. The colour is great on it. You've caught him really well, beautifully sharp. A lot of feather detail. You've got a little catch light in the eye. Again, it's a bird on a stick, but gives a perfect identification of the bird in beautiful condition. So works really nicely. I just think there's too much out of focus wood around tree, tree branch around it. If you look at your composition and you just zoom in on this a little bit, you can lose, the interest lies in the bird, and that's what you want to show. You can show a little bit of the wood, but you don't need to show all of the branches that this bird is sat within. Yes, it is its natural environment, but by showing so much, it's very distracting. You can still show the bird sat on the branch. You can lose the bottom third of the image and just show the branch that the bird is sat on, and then you can lose virtually all of the branches above him, especially the out of focus branches in the foreground and on the left there. Lose them. Then all you're looking at is the bird. At the moment, I'm looking at a lot of out of focus branches, which is really, really distracting. But the bird is eye-catching. That's what you want the viewer to look at. When you look at images like this, what do you want me, as a viewer, to look at in your image? The answer is the blue tick in the image. So get rid of anything that's not adding to that. If it's distracting, can you get rid of it? If you can, get rid of it, because it is just a distraction. I gave the blue tit a score of 14. Footprints in the sand. Nice image this. I like the composition with the sandbar in the front of you. There's a lot of sand there, but the title, it does what it says on the tin, so to speak. You've got the footprints leading you from the foreground into the reflection of the sun, and on the sandy beach there, where there's still some water held as the sea is receding. You've got that lovely little bit of light across the water there, taking you into the sun. You've got that beautiful horizon with the gold and the yellows, going across there. And then you've got the sky above it. Again, I'm going to say exactly the same thing. Do you need all of the sky? No, you don't. And the reason I say that, because at the top of the sky, you've got some white on the top right-hand side there that's showing, and it's judge bait. It's, if you've got white on the edge of an image and you can get rid of it, because a judge will pick it up. And when the viewer notices it, that's what they look at. Oh, there's a nice white patch there. And once your eye notices it, you go to it. You don't need it. Get rid of it. Really enhances the image, because then your eye hasn't got anything to be dragged away from. You just led into the image through the footprints, through the sun's reflection, through that nice reflection into the light, and then onto that nice horizon. You don't need the top top third of that sky, especially. You can get rid of it because you've still got the sky, and then the sky is adding to the image. There's no distraction in it, which that top right-hand corner distracts once you notice it. And everybody who looks at that will now say, oh, well, perhaps he's right. Well, I am right. I really am. You don't need anything that's distracting on an edge of an image. Get rid of it. I gave that a score of 16.
Carol Weatherly.
Moorhen. A nice shot of the moorhen. You've taken it from above, so you're looking down on it. It is sharp. You've got detail in it. You've got nice catch light in the eye. Ideally, you need to be a little bit lower. I know it's easy to say because I wasn't there and I don't know the circumstances that you took it in, but you seem to be quite close to it. If you'd have been able to kneel down, you'd have been more on a level with the bird and got a much better image of it. It's just when you're looking down on him like that, I don't know whether you was behind a fence and looking over the fence, looking down at him. I suspect that might be the case, but it just takes that edge off the bird. If you can kneel down and take a lower angle of it, you get a much better representation of the bird. I gave that a score of 14. This is an Indian sunset. And I think this is a lovely image, quite serene, beautifully taken. And I'm going to contradict myself in every aspect here, because I don't mind this image having a lot of sea in the background. You've just got that melding of the sea and the horizon and the sky there, which works really, really well. It's right at the top of the image. There's nothing, you know, so there's not too much of it. But the two ox carts being led across the sand there, you know, aren't quite silhouetted, because there's still a little bit of detail being held into it. So it's just a lovely image, this. Beautiful colours on it. Love the way that you got the golden sand, and there's not too much golden sand. And you'll notice there's just enough to give you a nice baseline to work from. There's nothing out of focus in it, you know, so there's nothing distracting in the background. You've got that lovely recession work, that pale, almost milky light you get, you know, as you're led through into the distance. So that worked really well for me, and I gave that score of 18.
Jay Patel.
The Grim Reaper, a really good quality compositional shot, this. I like the way it's been put together. What I like about it is the way that the authors utilise the light in this, and I think they've done that very, very well. A lot of compositional shots or composite shots like this, you tend to find the light doesn't quite work nicely sometimes. But I think the authors handle this one really well. There's detail where you need it to be, but they've blanked out that background a little bit and toned it down. I like the bird coming in from the right-hand side, because he fills, you know, a little bit of a pale blank spot there. You've got the tree acting as a nice stop on the left. You've got the two rocks at the bottom, which act as a nice almost valley that lead you through into the Grim Reaper there. So I think that works very well as an image. If I was being a little bit pernickety, I would have said you just need a little bit more separation between his sickle and the tree. But that's just being pernickety. I gave that score of 18.
Keith Taylor.
And if you're looking at red squirrel shots, nature shots, this is one that, you know, this is a top quality shot, this. He is doing something. It looks like he's eating a crushed nut there, so that works very nicely. He's been enticed into that little, you know, sort of cup in the tree, which works very nicely. And if you're photographing squirrels and you're feeding nuts, if you crush the nuts up, the squirrel will eat the nut where you leave it. If you don't, and just leave the nut whole, he'll pick the nut up and go and bury it. So the little tip is there is, if you want to take squirrel shots, crush your nuts up, put them wherever you want to use as a bait trap, and he'll come and he'll eat the nuts where the nuts are. And you can get some wonderful shots like this. And this is just a cracker. Nothing distracting, background's nicely out of focus. You've got great contact with him. He's beautifully sharp front to back, good colour saturation. I gave that a score of 20.
Christine Armstrong.
Now, I was asked to give, you know, my shot of the my favourite, and I gave it to image 22, which was the sunset stalk silhouette. I just think this is a really, really nice shot. I love the light on it, love the silhouette there. You know, it's an image that I would consider putting up on my wall, and that's why I like that one. So I gave that as my favourite shot out this section. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the colour sections. The scores have been high, but the quality of the images has been really, really good. And I think they reflect the scores. Okay, thank you. Right, here we go, monochrome section. This one's called The Long Walk Home. And it's a little, reminds me a little bit of the Blackpool shot with the sand and the textures that you got on the sand in the Blackpool shot in the colour section. This is monochrome, but here it's slightly different. You've got the girl walking back up the beach with a surfboard there. Like the way the authors thought about the composition here, because she's beautifully on that third there. You've got a nice baseline with them footprints leading across, takes you into the image. Again, that's circling her, so it keeps your eye into her. You've got her footprints that go off into the background, which lead you through the image that way. But I love the textures and because you're using a long focal length lens here, and the compression that you've almost got with the sands there. Looking down slightly works well because you've not got anything distracting like an horizon or a skyline or the people in the background shot. It's all the sand. You've got the water running away from you as she's coming up through the mud there. So it works really nicely, that. I love the folded impact that you get off that sand though. I gave that a score of 18.
Steve Weatherly.
All right.
This is the Flying Scotsman, and this has got a slight sepia tone to it, which just I think it's meant to be giving it a little bit of a sort of old-fashioned look to it. It doesn't quite work for me with this image. It much better suits monochromatic. You get a much better contrast when you put this into black and white. You get a much better tonal range in it. And again, if you tweak the tone curves on this in monochrome, you will find the aspects of the image really are brought out. It has much more impact. Compositionally wise, I like it. I thought the authors got it just right. I like the way you've got a nice base for the image to sit on, and you've got the valley on the right hand side with that little tree line that takes you into the bridge. The V shape that sort of takes you to each side of the bridge works really well. You've got the viaduct coming across, the train's perfectly positioned in it, and then you've got, you know, in the distance you've got that bit of recession. There's no sky. The authors kept that out of the image deliberately, and just sort of kept the skyline there with the hills. So compositionally wise, he's got it absolutely perfect. It just, I think the sepia tone treatment of it just takes the edge off it something. So I gave that a score of 13. This is Confined. I think this is a beautiful image. Really works very, very nicely for me, this. Love the lighting on it. Really like the composition. The look on in the eye there, you know, speaks volumes. You know, it is penned in. It knows it's locked in there, and it's just looking through that, and it's just a wonderful image. That I gave that a score of 19. The lighting on it is stunning. Hepworth, record shot of the museum pieces, and I don't mind this at all. I think it's a very good record shot. I like the aspects of the composition. I think the author has thought about this because he's very cleverly got a person positioned in the hole in the left-hand side sculpture, which is almost looks like a face, the sculpture itself. But the author thought about the composition there on that aspect of it.
I was looking.
I think it's a shame on two aspects of it. One, they've only got half a sculpture on the right-hand side there. And you know, when I said about anything light on the edge of an image is distracting, well, half a sculpture on the right-hand side there is a little bit distracting as well. So I think compositionally wise, you could have lost that. And then you're just missing the left-hand edge of the sculpture on the left there. You're just missing that corner part of it. So I think if you'd have just altered your angle very slightly to include that, and then in post-processing get rid of the sculpture on the right-hand side, it would have added a lot to the image. I gave that a score of 16.
Colin Rogers.
This is a really nice shot, this, of Maya. Wonderful demonstration of good use of studio lighting. You know, it's very softly lit. I like the pose. I like the profile aspect that the author's used on this. He's kept detail because you can see just around the edge of all her hairline, around the top of her head there, and then down the back. I don't mind it going into shadow down her back itself. You know, I think that just adds, because you've still got detail in the shoulder of the tattoo there. Beautifully lit on the face because there's no burnout at all on it. So that it's a little bit light in the hand. That could have just been toned down a little bit because it is just a little bit distracting there. But really good quality studio shot. And I gave that a score of 18.
Mandy Foreman.
Looking for clues. Nice shot, this. I like it. Again, it's a studio type setup shot. Perched there in the window seat. I like the composition on it. I did look at the composition on this, and there was aspects of it that I thought worked really well. You know, and then there was one or two things that I picked up on. The two things I picked up on was, if you're going to do a shot like this, you either need to do one of two things: include him all in it, so you've got the bottom half of his left leg and his foot, or don't, but go in a little bit closer than you have done here and do sort of a waist shot up on it. And the other one that caught my eye was on the left-hand curtain. You've not included all the curtain. It goes out of the image and then comes back in, which I find a little bit distracting as well. But I did look at the composition. It's beautifully sharp throughout. I did do a recomposition and looked at it myself, of looking at it from almost waist up. And it works really well because the detail in him and his face and the angle that you've got it at worked really nicely on it. I gave this a shot, this looking for clues image, a score of 17.
Ruth Lockery.
This is abandoned. Compositionally wise, I like it. I like the way you've got a leading with the path leading from the bottom right, curves around and takes you up to the woods. Again, a bit of the wall there leads you into the, looks like an old bothy, an old shed there. Like the sky in the background, and I like the tree line. It's winter, so you know the leafage on the trees is half gone. It's been monochrome, so everything's taken out. I think it's been a little bit HDR'd. You know, the shadows have been brought out, so you know you do get a sense of shadow, but within them woods, it's quite light. And I would have liked to have seen perhaps not quite so much detail in the woods there. You know, along where the wall runs across, I would have expected that to be a little bit more shady. And that would have added depth to the image because you would have had a nice light foreground and then a little bit of darkness in the background there, which would have allowed the foreground to stand out a little bit more. So I think the treatment's just been a little bit too much because everything's perfectly exposed when you look at it, from the foreground to the stone detail in the building to the trees and to even underneath the trees where you would expect it to be dark. Everything is perfectly exposed. And I think it's just the post processing that's just the author's brought the detail out, but perhaps just a little bit too much. I gave that a score of 15.
Colin Yates.
This is Engine Driver. The old engine there is working away. The engine driver himself is got his back to you with a hat on, so you've got no contact with him whatsoever. You've got the chimney going up to the top, with the exhaust coming out the chimney, which works nicely. I like the way that the machinery sort of balances either side. So you've got the pistons on either side pumping up and down there, works nicely. Because he's got his back to you and he's got a hat on, I think you've lost something of the image here. I don't know whether you might have been able to move around the side and catch more of him, but then not knowing what the circumstances were, there might have been other engines to his left or to his right, which would have impacted on the background of the picture. So I'm not going to really go into that too much, but there's no contact with the engine driver at all, and I think you needed that just a little bit more than you've got. So I gave that a score of where am I? The engine driver score of 14. If Carlsberg made train sets, they'd certainly make this one. Lovely image of the engine here, with the driver just sticking his head out there, works really nice. You've got the steam that is being exhausted from the valves at the front of the engine. And you've got a nice base with the platform on the left-hand side there. The nice thing about this image is you've not got 64 people all stood around admiring the engine. You've managed to capture it with nobody else there. So I think the author's done really well. There are a couple of people in the background, as you can see from the reflections on the tender, which sort of work because they're not impacting it. But good quality blacks, good quality whites on it. Nothing really burnt out. I'm not expecting detail in the steam, the exhaust from the valves at the front of the engine there. So works very nicely. I gave that a score of 16.
Peter Kay.
This is called Ton, which again worked nicely as an image. It's gone into a close-up detail. Again, this is one of them images. It needs the tone curves tweaking. If you tweak your tone curves on this image, the difference is amazing on it. Really adds a lot of punch to it, because the darkness, the mottled darkness that you get on that really starts to jump out against the white of the flaked paint there, and it really adds a lot of impact to the image. But I like the composition, I like the way the author's thought about that, gone in close, got a nice detailed shot. Needs some work on the post-processing though to add that impact. I gave that a score of 15.
Carolyn Phillips.
Lurking in the shadows, and again, this is one of those that I quite liked. I like the shadow of the cat itself. I think that's been caught wonderfully. I like the patination on the curtains or the wallpaper that the shadow's falling on. The catch-22 with this is the shadow of the cat is matching up with that dark line coming down there, and I don't know whether that's a curtain or whether or not, or it's something dropping down, but however it's been done, because the shadows are meeting on both of them, I find that quite distracting. I would have liked some separation between the shadow of the cat and the dark line coming down. But I gave that a score of 16.
Dan Stott.
Brighton Beach, nice shot of the beach here. I think the author's looked at the lighting on this one. I think it does suit monochrome. They've got some lovely detail in the foreground here as a base. Beautiful reflections on the coverings for the boats in the foreground there. I like the masts on the right-hand side there, act as a nice stop. Again, I would say, do you need all of that sky? Because the way you've got it at the moment, the horizon is very, very central. You can afford to lose the top third of the sky because you've still got a very good sky, and that would take your horizon up onto the top third, which gives the image a lot more, compositionally, a lot more impact. So the author might just want to think about that and just try it yourself and see if it does make a difference to your own point of view. It certainly did with mine. I like the two figures in the left-hand corner there, or it might be two rocks, but that looks like two children sat by the beach, but I think it's actually a rock when I look at it a bit closer. And it's just occurred to me that it could be children, but I don't know. Anyway, but I like the ruin of the pier in the background as well. That works really, really nicely. So all in all, I thought it was quite a good image, and I gave that a score of 16.
Colin Rogers.
This is a great shot of the bull. Absolutely perfectly taken. Beautiful image. Pin sharp from front to back, almost, of the animal. Don't mind it, it's a portrait shot, so I don't mind the rest of the bull not being there. Your brain can fill in what a bull looks like without any problems. The background's muted, nothing distracting in it. You've got great contact with the eye there. You've got lovely little catch light there. So it looks really good. Beautiful detail, pin sharp, a lot of detail in his fur all across. So it works really well as an image. That I gave that score of 18.
Kirsty Railton.
Bomber Command, reenactment day at an air show. You've got the guy dressed up as the pilot here. He might actually be the pilot, I don't know. If he is, I'd rather envy him if he's going to go flying in a Lancaster. But good quality lighting on him, silhouetted nicely against the Lancaster in the background. Background's nicely out of focus. The only thing I find really off-putting is the catch-22 with shots like this is you've got that fence along the edge of the taxiway there where the Lancaster's parked up at, which is really, really distracting. And the second thing I always find that there's nothing you can do about it is that during the Second World War, a lot of these bomber crews were at the age of sort of 19 to 25. So they were all very young men. And sadly, these days, they're all people who are, sort of in the 40s and 50s and sometimes even in the 60s who are flying them. So when you think back of it and put this into perspective, in reality, this might have been a 19 or a 20-year-old guy going out on a 7 or 8 hour bombing run with, sort of a 50-50 chance of coming back. So that puts it into perspective. But a really nice picture of him, and I gave that a score of a 17.
Colin Yates.
Tim Booth, aka James. Nice studio setup shot, works well. I'm presuming it's a studio setup shot because of the lighting on it. If it was a stage shot, I think the lighting might have been harsher on him because of the way that the light stages, and he may have been cut out and put on the background. But if it's a studio shot, then it's the background suits. It's even lighting throughout, so he's got lighting that's been bounced all around him. So then there's filling lighting, so there's no real tonal ranges in that. He's just well lit all over. If I'm being pernickety, I'd say you're missing his little finger on his right hand at the bottom. You just lost the edge of it. Well, that's being pernickety. The other thing, which is sort of a little bit distracting, is he's got his eyes closed. And I think if you're doing any sort of studio or portrait shots, even if they're at concerts, there's always an image where you can get there out with them with their eyes open. And that's the shots that you're looking for. You need to have some contact with him. And I don't know what he's singing or whatever, and it might be a song that really sort of is quite emotional and he's got his eyes shut. But to present as an image, you need to have some sort of eye contact. Even if it's not direct, you need the eyes open. And unfortunately, this one's he's got his eyes closed. So I gave that a score of 15.
Ruth Lockery.
This is London skyline, and I just love the atmosphere on this image. I think that's a stunner. I really like that. Like the quality of it. I think there's good blacks, good whites, details, good tonal ranges in between. I love the treatment of it, the way you've got the streaks on the buildings going down. I think that works really, really well for this image. Not too much sky. You've kept the top of the buildings in, but not too much sky above it. But the quality of the sky in the background allows them buildings to stand, stand out from it. I think it's a cracker. I gave that score of 20.
Brad Cheek.
Melissa Cove. And again, this was one of them images that I kept coming back to because there was aspects of it that I thought worked really well. I like the sand base here at the bottom. I like the footprints leading into towards the edge of the water. The tide is obviously on the way out because you can tell because where it's coming, where it's sort of washed away the footprints. Like it looks like it's receding and washing the footprints coming away. You've got a little bit of movement in the water, so it's a quarter of a second exposure or something, just to give that little bit of movement to the water. You've got some lovely detail in the rocks there, on both the left and the right, and then you've got the skyline in the horizon's very, very central. Again, I'm going to say what I've said all along this evening is, do you need all of that sky? It's a picture of two halves. You've got a brilliant sky, and then you've got a really nice bottom half of the image where the interest lies. That image where that part of the image where the waves just crashing over the rock works really well. That's a nice little focal point because it just drags your eye in and holds it there. And then you look at the detail in the rocks. You don't need all of the sky. If you lost 2/3 of that sky, it would take your horizon right up to the top of the image, still keep you a good sky, because that's what you want to show. You need to show a bit of sky in a seascape like this, but you don't need all of that sky. That's half the image you've lost in the sky, and people are either going to be looking at the sky or at the rocks in the foreground. And I think the interest for me lies in the water and the rocks in the foreground rather than in a good quality sky at the top half of the image. The fighting each other in this image, the sky against the foreground. And I don't think I think the foreground wins. You don't need all the sky. And I gave that a score of 14. Acorn Bank Artifacts, quality record shot of the urn sculptures. This really nice detail on it, sharp where it needs to be across the three faces. The background's nicely out of focus. Again, if I was being a bit pernickety, I'd say the white window is just a little bit distracting because it takes your eye away from the three faces on the sculpture. You can tone that down, so then it's not quite distracting. But the interest lies in the three faces there. So I think that works really well. I gave that a score of 16.
Jay Patel.
Wild Oats. I like the idea behind this. I quite enjoy doing similar type shots where I isolate a particular stem or a particular a single strand of a plant or something like that to work on and see if I can make it work. I don't think this quite works in monochrome because it's lost in the background. The tonal ranges is the same throughout the images in the monochrome in this particular case because of the treatment. And I think the individual stem is lost in the background. So there's very little you can make out, especially in the bottom half of the image. It's all one. You've really got to work at separating it. And I think that's what you need to do if you're isolating a particular stem or a particular, sort of like a rush of reed or something like that, or in a cornfield. You need to be able to isolate it from its background somewhat if you can. Otherwise, you end up with this type of image where what you're trying to look at is blending too much in with the background. I gave that a score of 14. This is called watching. So I'm presuming that this is a camera on the second story of the building there. I think this is a really good quality image. I think the authors thought about this compositionally wise. They've stood at the edge of the building, slightly off-centered it, so then it's not straight up it's not equal either side. You've got that perspective working for you. The geometric shapes that you've got here and the structure work well for you because the perspective all leads you up. There's nothing going to take you away. If it was going to be pernickety, there's that bit on the right-hand third there at the top edge, which is coming out at a different angle from everything else, which is just a little bit distracting. Takes your eye off the image because again, it's right on the edge of the image. That could have been blended out. You could have got rid of that and kept and not distracted from the image from it. But I like the treatment of it. It's got good blacks, good whites, nothing burnt out on it. So I think that works very well. I gave that a score of 18.
Brad Cheek.
Reactor. Again, another pattern shot, building pattern shot. Works nicely. The authors really worked that well on the composition on this. You can tell by the structure of the image, the patternation he's got on it, the way that he's lined everything up nicely. I like the two blacks, square shapes there, give you two focal points to bounce you around the image. And there's enough contrast within the rest of the image to allow you to look around it. But you keep going around in a circle with this image. So it works quite nicely as a pattern image for me. I gave that a score of 18.
Alan Phillips.
End of the day, so you've got the sunset, you've got swans swimming across a lake here, which is really nicely silhouetted, nicely, really gives you almost acting as a baseline for the rest of the image to fall on. You've got some nice detail in the water with the ripples. You've got a lovely sort of landline there, where the water meets that headland. And then you've got that lovely mountain in the background. And then you've got the sky there works quite nicely. But again, it's quite bright and it's really sort of jumping out at you that. In this particular image, I think it works quite well. Now, you might think this is going to be strange what I'm going to say next, but I'll just explain my thought processes. Has everybody seen Lord of the Rings, the film? And Gandalf, the wizard? Well, that cloud on the left-hand side looks like Gandalf because you've got a big sweeping hat you got a little face coming down. If I could show you with with the arrow, but then you've got a little nose sticking out, and then it drops down, and you've got a beard there. There's a shape, there's a face in that cloud when you look at it. And I see faces in rocks and clouds and trees and everything, but there's a face without a shadow of a doubt in that cloud, which quite amused me. So I did quite like this image. It made me chuckle when I looked at it. And I gave that a score of 17.
Mike Atkinson.
Morecambe Sea Defences. I like this. This is quite an unusual shot. I've walked across there, but never thought about this particular angle before. So I'll look at it next time I'm up that neck of the woods. But I like the way that you've got a little baseline here, just in the foreground, and you've got the rock sat on the sea defences. And the author's thought about this because he's thought about like it's almost like an inverted valley going across. Sort of looking away the way that they stretch out either side. Then you've got a nice horizon, which is, sort of nicely on that third. And the sky in this image works nicely because you've got a nice dark line above it, and you've just got that recession of light going across the horizon there with the mountains in the background. So it works quite nicely as an image that. I gave it a score of 16.
Vince Spratling.
A long walk. Again, one of these images, the people make it. That's your focal point. And this is what I say about having a focal point in an image. It's the people that sort of keep this image alive. Again, you've got a nice space here with the rocks in the foreground. You've got the beach walk going across. You've got an S of running across the sands there, leading into the mid-distance. They then led across the estuary and then onto the horizon in the background. The author has put the horizon on the third there, but again, this is one of them images. I don't think you need all the sky. You could lose 2/3 of the sky, still keep an interest in sky, but then the interest is in the land and the seascape rather than a big white fluffy cloud in the sky. I don't think you need all that sky in this, again, the image. Is it adding to the image, or is it a little bit of a distraction? If it's a distraction, look at the composition, because you can have 3 or 4 different ways of viewing this image when you're looking at compositions, and when you're post-processing it, crop it and look at them one against the other and see which one works out best. Don't imagine it, actually do it. So you end up with 4 different images with different compositions on them, and see what they look like. Because you will be surprised. You look at one and you say, well, actually, I didn't think about it that way, but it does work. So do think about composition when you're thinking about your image, and do it. Crop it so then you've got a different perspective of the image. I gave that a score of 15.
Keith Taylor.
Contemplation. I've seen a few type of images like this. This one works very nicely. I think the author's thought about the lighting on this studio shot setup. But the author's worked well with the lighting here. It's got it really nice, to bring out the detail in the guy's face. I like the way that the guy's holding his glasses. There's still lighting on his left shoulder there, which gives him a sense of depth and form and texture to him as well. And I like the background, the wood paneling, just a little bit of highlights there, just to give something in the background, but nothing too distracting. So I thought that worked quite nicely. I gave that a score of 17.
Dan Stott.
This one's simply titled Wings, and it's the wings of the swan with the detail because they've been lit up. The swan's head itself is a little bit in shadow, which is a little bit sad because I think if it had been lit as well as the wings, it would have added to the image, but it doesn't distract too much because it's in shadow. because the detail in the wings here is absolutely beautiful. Great lights. You've got all the detail in the feathers there. So it does what it says on the tin. It's highlighting the detail in the wings here, which work well. I gave that a score of 16.
Anissa Sadat.
North Sea Observatory, a nice record shot of the observatory here. Works well, good detail, nice and sharp throughout. The sky adds to it. Nothing that's OTT. It's a little bit burnt out the sky, so you've just lost some of the impact on that because of that. But you've got nice reflections in the window, but you can still see into them and still see through the building as well. So as a record shot of the building, I think that works quite nicely. I gave that a score of 14. Seed heads. Now this one works in comparison with the previous one that we looked at before. You see the difference that this is made when it's nothing in the background that it can merge or blend with. This is I suspect a tabletop type setup shot, but the author has isolated it. The foliage here with the seed heads coming out, which allow it to really stand out nicely. Good detail in it, very sharp, well thought out, nice shape to it as well. I thought that was quite well done, and I gave that a score of 16.
Alan Phillips.
Brown hair in the stubble. Now, does that brown hair not look really miffed? Does he not look happy? Take a look at his face. If he's not having a bad day, I don't know what he is, because he looks really upset about something. But it's a wonderful shot. Love the composition. I think the author's got it just right. You can see where the depth of field lies in it. He's perfectly exposed. Great detail, pin sharp, beautiful contact with the eye there, nice little catch light, nothing in the background. Scores 20 any day of the week.
Christine Armstrong.
Okay, this is called Stretch. It's a lamb, just sort of running about and then having a nice stretch. It's rim lit because the light's behind him, so you've got light running across his back and down his hindquarters. Face is a little bit in shadow, which is just a bit of a shame, but that's the lighting that you're working with. My comment on this is you've missed the hind foot out, is where he's stretching. You've lost his feet there, and if you're doing it all like that, then you needed to have him all in the image, really, just to keep him there. I gave Stretch a score of 15.
Anissa Sadat.
Le Pipes. It works nicely as a pattern shaped shot. Like the way that the author's got the angles here working nicely. Like the pipe in the background, which is the vertical, and then it's slashed across by the 4 pipes going horizontal. I like the shadow on the pipes as well, because that gives shape and form and texture to it. So it's a very simple shot, but it's quite effective. I gave that a score of 15.
Lucy Wilson.
Arctic puffin, nicely isolated, sat there perched nicely on the rock, head twisted towards you, so you've got a profile of him. Nothing distracting in the background, long focal length lens, so it's blurred, so works nicely. My only criticism of this is it might have suited colour better, because the flamboyance of the colours that you get in these birds during the breeding season, when they've got the beak in full colour, is really, really good. And I'm not sure whether it suits monochrome. quite as well. I gave that score of 15.
Christine Armstrong,
Ashton Memorial, and again, quality shot of the memorial here. Good lighting on it, gives it shape and form and texture there. You've got depth because you've got shadows working for you, in the arches of the building there. The authors filled the sky up with the tree foliage, both sides, which works, and you've got the path from the bottom that leads you up into it. So it's a really nice shot of Ashton Memorial. That I gave that score of 18.
Brink Spratlin,
Power Ascending. Nice shot of the aircraft here. The author's got it just nicely here. They've got it nicely at an angle, nice diagonal, good background in the sky into it. Not too much of it because you've got the entire aircraft, but with still a little bit of space all around it. You've got a nice shutter speed. You've got a little bit of blur in the propellers there. If you're doing prop-driven aircraft, you don't want anything faster than a 250th of a second, otherwise you freeze the propellers and you don't get any movement in it. So I think you're just verging on the tipping of the edge here where you're starting just to hold the propellers, but you still have a little bit of blur in them. So it works quite nicely. I gave that a score of 16.
Kirsty Railton,
Sperm Point, nice shot this. The authors thought about the composition. They've got, sort of a little bit low down there, unless they're very tall. But I don't know. But it works nicely that the perspective you've got, because the foreground breaks the horizon all the way down, and the end of the sperms, they're just sort of meet with the horizon, which works nice. You've got detail in the wood in the foreground there, which again is nice. You've got a good quality sky. Now this one, I don't mind the sky, because if you look at that shape of the sky, it sort of echoes the wood in the foreground there, because you've got that light leading you up through as well. And the treatment of that sky has been done really well. I think that's a really nice image. I gave it a score of 17.
Carol Weatherly,
Tired piglets. There's not a lot you can say. It's an R shot, it's beautifully done. You've got all the piglets all piled up on top of each other, all asleep. It works really, really nice. It's just a real cute picture of the piglets. It's just a shot that makes you smile. I gave it a score of 18.
Carol Weatherly,
This is the Eiffel Tower, shot at the top of the Eiffel Tower here. Detailed shot, which works well. It's nicely lit. You've got detail in the shadow underneath the canopy there. It's good quality, very sharp from the bottom to the top as well. So the author's, got his composition and his lighting right on it. So as a record shot at the top of the tower, I think it's a really nice image. I gave that a score of 15.
Lucy Wilson,
A young red squirrel. Again, a nice quality shot of the squirrel here. Works very nice, absolutely beautifully pin sharp. If I was being pernickety again, I'd say there's a little bit too much space. You could lose, certainly almost from on the left-hand side there, just where it meets the edge of the top of the where the top of the branch in the front just meets the edge of the image. You could cut it off there and lose sort of a good half of the out of focus foreground. I don't think that would have done the image any harm. Background's nicely out of focus. Does it lose a little bit because it's in monochrome rather than colour? Perhaps it does, but it's still a very good quality image. Beautifully sharp, a lot of detail. That gets an 18.
Mike Atkinson.
Lovely family shot this one for the family album. Little lad on the beach there running about. Oh, well, sat there, but he's obviously been running about. Got him quite nice there. He's got a nice tilt to his head. You got a nice big smile. You got good contact with him, with the eyes there. So all in all, works well. If I was being, again, I'd have perhaps cut something off on the right, compositionally wise, so then he's moved slightly more to the third, rather than being so central. But again, works nicely as an image. I gave that a score of 15.
Jay Patel.
And this is Keep Out. And I can see why the author took it, because the gate posts are still there, the fence has disintegrated and been removed over the years. And again, so you got all the foliage just running around the gate post. I think there's a bit too much of the foliage around it. I think you could have kept the idea behind it, but just gone in a little bit closer to the gate posts as well, rather than keep all of the woods in as you've done here. So I gave that score of 14. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the final image. My image that I picked was the brown hare in the stubble as my own favourite. That one. I think it's a great image, that. I just love the look of that hare. He looks really, really like he's not having a good day. But, you know, if somebody hasn't got any beer in the fridge, it's him. But my congratulations to everybody. The standard of the images, I thought, were very high throughout, both in the colour and the monochrome. I didn't want to give them, any lower scores than I have done, and I know there've been high scores, and some people criticise judges sometimes for the scores that they give. But I think the quality of the images warrant the scores that I've given them. I think it's been really good. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to view them and judge them.